It's a new day, but not on Deep Space Nine. We're on a matte painting of a grim diesel punk planet, a bit like Blade Runner, but with a sepia filter applied. Within the matte painting is a pub filled with ne'er-do-wells, and one of them looks a lot like O'Brien. He's eavesdropping on some lads at a table, talking about a deal that sounds like it's gone bad, there being an issue with something described only as the merchandise. In case any viewer wasn't entirely convinced things are dodgy, one of them's also hacking a terminal to bill somebody else for the food they're ordering. The stealthy use of a gizmo from O'Brien gives the hacker more than he expected, namely some lightning to the bonce, all of which gives O'Brien the chance to step in and look like a hero. The hacker's okay, but the same can't be said of his equipment. This, it seems, was the point, as when the hacker starts worrying at the idea of asking their superior to provide a replacement, O'Brien steps in again and says it might be fixable, for the right price. The hacker's mate takes over, and as he's the important one here, let's drag out the wheel of names and slap one on him. He'll now be known as Syphil's Sock by Ensign Shutterfox. Syphil's Sock seems to agree that he's important, to the point where he's surprised O'Brien doesn't know who he is. He hands O'Brien the gizmos with an implication that he'll be well taken care of, if he can repair them. Later that evening, O'Brien's meeting with a mate, or perhaps the term should be handler, as he's the one overseeing this Starfleet operation to penetrate the Orion Syndicate, Star Trek's version of the space Mafia. Starfleet intelligence has been having some trouble with their spies turning up a little bit on the dead side, a suspected leak being the explanation. As soon as O'Brien manages to figure out who it is, he can go home, him having been chosen because the space Mafia likes people with tech skills. Syphil's Sock is his way in, so the handler tells O'Brien to take whatever work he's given. A repaired gizmo delivered by O'Brien the following morning seems to impress Syphil's Sock. That's why he invites O'Brien back home, an apartment he shares with his cat. Syphil's Sock did some checking, you see, as a down-on-his-luck tinkerer being able to repair so complex a piece of hardware is rather unusual. Starfleet intelligence has laid a nice and convincing background, though, so Syphil's Sock is willing to trust him with a more serious problem. He bought some Klingon weapons for his boss Ramus, only he's been ripped off. They don't work, and that will make Ramus very upset indeed. Having someone who can repair them, then, is quite fortunate, so much so that, if he can solve this problem, Syphil's Sock might be willing to give O'Brien a permanent job. The Klingon weapons need parts, but that's easy enough. O'Brien's handler gets them from the source, this planet apparently having its own Klingon ambassador for some reason. Easy isn't always smart, though, and one of the underlings of Syphil's Sock asks where O'Brien got the hardware. That's a fair question, thinks Syphil's Sock, and after being evasive about a supplier, O'Brien finally claims he stole them from a warehouse, and says he didn't want to share that fact in case he gets caught. It's a great lie, Syphil's Sock being impressed by O'Brien's willingness to try and shield those around him if things go pear-shaped. He's so impressed that he's decided O'Brien should get the job, and that means a makeover. A new suit shows how generous Syphil's Sock can be to his friends. His enemies are another matter, as the guy who ripped him off with the Klingon weapons is finding out. He claims they worked fine when he delivered them and refuses a refund, caveat emptor. Some pooped yellow to the leg changes his mind, but Syphil's Sock has decided he doesn't want a refund after all, caveat venditor. Back in his apartment, Syphil's Sock is explaining to O'Brien that he can't allow a slight against him to go unanswered, not when his family on another planet rely on him. Weakness in this line of work is a fatal flaw, and it's not something from which you can just choose to retire if things go wrong. The Space Mafia have people everywhere after all, even Starfleet. That piques O'Brien's interest to the point that he asks too many questions about it while Syphil's Sock is trying to talk about his family. He covers for his curiosity by saying it sounds like bullshit and would be easier to explain by whoever it is being a plant. That's not possible, says Syphil's Sock, as the guy has already provided the names of other plants, then explains his boss Ramus met him on Riser when he was running the weather control system and offered him a shitload of cash to make it stop raining. Speaking of Ramus, he wants to meet, and he wants it right now. Back to the pub we go to witness some new people teleporting in. The one with the best hairdo is Ramus, and his questions about O'Brien are settled by Syphil's sock vouching for him. The Vorta Ramus brought with him doesn't seem overly impressed with this security system, but lets the matter go. The Vorta is the reason for the meeting, it seems. He wanted to see Syphil's sock for himself after sourcing those Klingon weapons, and also let him know there's another job coming his way, a very important one. He'll be told closer to the time, which presumably means Syphil's sock has passed whatever inspection the Vorta gave him. Once they've gone, Syphil's sock makes sure O'Brien understands what just happened, not the important job, but being vouched for. If O'Brien fucks up in any way, shape or form, Syphil's sock will go down with him. O'Brien was here to identify the Starfleet turncoat, and he now has enough information to do so. Of course, that was before his handler found out about the Space Mafia being in cahoots with the Dominion, so now the mission has changed to finding out what the bloody hell's going on. That means staying in character for a while longer, which involves helping Syphil's sock and company electronically rob a bank. Perhaps it's as reward for this that Syphil's sock introduces O'Brien to a lady of negotiable hospitality. O'Brien manages to get out of it by lying about having recently met someone and, once they're alone, fends off inquiries about his fictional girlfriend. The conversation becomes one of family and how O'Brien should start one, Syphil's sock saying he'd be able to tell if this new girlfriend was wife material. He's always been good at judging people, you see. That's why he's become so friendly with O'Brien. The feeling is somewhat mutual if O'Brien's chat with his handler is any indication. He and Syphil's sock have been spending a lot of time together, and the prospect of the guy doing it dead once O'Brien finishes the job and buggers off is starting to bother him. The handler suggests that's a good reason to gather plenty of evidence, as the safest place for Syphil's sock once shit starts going down will be in a Federation prison. Things might not get that far. Our nefarious group returns to the bar to find Ramus and the Vorta waiting. There's a traitor among them, and our Vorta wants to guess who it is. He settles on O'Brien, so it comes as quite a shock when the bartender shoots someone else in the back. The guy had been making money without giving the Space Mafia their cut. As the corpse is dragged away, we move on to business, specifically the job our Vorta associate wanted Syphil's sock to do. We're going to kill a Klingon. Not just any Klingon, but the ambassador here. He's previously called for the Klingons to stop fighting the Dominion and protect their own territory instead, which is why Gowron got pissed off with him and sent him here. Killing him with a Klingon weapon will make it look like a hit from his own people, and Gowron will be blamed. The Vorta thinks that'll make other Klingons lend support to the dead guy's cause and break off hostilities with the Dominion. Oh, and obviously not a word about his involvement is to leave this room. Rather a shame, then, that he just explained the whole thing to a spy. O'Brien tells his handler everything, including details of the plan. The handler says he'll pass that on to the Klingons, but O'Brien realizes this means Syphil's sock is going to get murderized as a result. Learning the handler never had any intention of putting Syphil's sock in prison certainly doesn't help, and neither does being told his mission is over. A rebuttal in the form of a fist is followed by O'Brien scarpering. To Syphil's sock we go, who's making sure his cat has enough food before leaving to do a bit of the old assassinating. O'Brien arrives to tell him he should call things off. An excuse of the Klingons knowing about the plan is brushed aside as nerves, so O'Brien moves up to admitting he works for Starfleet. That's treated like a joke at first, then received angrily as he accepts it. O'Brien's offers to help him are ignored. Syphil's sock vouched for him after all, and the Space Mafia have people everywhere, so running isn't an option. Even a prison cell won't solve his problem, as they just kill his family instead. But his family might be left alone if the Space Mafia thought Syphil's sock didn't know about O'Brien, and the only way to make them believe that is to go through with the plan and accept what will happen to him. O'Brien's back home and explaining things to Bashir, which has got to be a pretty serious no-no from a security point of view, but let's ignore that for now. Bashir thinks he's lucky Syphil's sock didn't kill him, though O'Brien says he knew that wouldn't happen. Bashir telling O'Brien that the end result wasn't his fault doesn't help much either. He instead says he's glad O'Brien's back before buggering off, so we'll leave O'Brien to ponder his culpability and adapt to having a new cat until the next adventure. Syphil Sock chose this life. Whatever happens to him is his fault. It's the argument used by O'Brien's handler, though a familiar one to many of us. Such arguments are used regularly in our own time as a way of dehumanizing those who turn to crime, often to excuse the self-proclaimed civilized people treating them inhumanely. It's a bollocks argument, of course, one that's both ignorant of how your start in life can limit your choices and also conveniently ignores the crimes of those who already have wealth and power. Thus, we end up in a world where stealing a loaf of bread is deserving of a lynch mob, but committing tax fraud to rob society of basic infrastructure is either a social faux pas or even something to be admired. A bollocks argument in our time, then, but this show isn't set in our time, is it? It's set in a time when we've created a post-scarcity society. Syphil Sock said he sent all his money back to his wife and kids, but was that actually necessary? How much does the argument of providing for your family stand up when the Federation have basically got that covered? Is the bollocks argument still bollocks? It's more complicated, though. The world we're on, Farius, is presumably not Federation. It's never outright stated, but the heavy industry suggests as much, coupled with the fact that it's even possible to be down on your luck. Bashir's dad, unable to hold down a job his entire life, still managed to have a decent enough existence on Earth, and the means to travel. So let's go with the assumption Farius is not a Federation world. That raises the question of why humans and Bolians, both part of the Federation, are here. Even more curious is that Syphil Sock has family on New Sydney, a distinctly human-sounding planet. We'll later learn it's not part of the Federation either, but it's clearly a better place than here. Syphil Sock certainly seemed to think so anyway. We're left with a number of questions then. First off, if members of a Federation-affiliated species choose to live on an unaffiliated world, do they lose Federation citizen status as standard, or must that be a formal withdrawal? Second, can those individuals apply to rejoin, and what process is involved? Third, what happens to the children of those people? Is anybody from a member species, regardless of origin, able to move to a Federation world, or does getting born on Dieselpunk Prime mean you're shit out of luck? For the sake of this episode, we can boil all of those questions down to just one. Did Syphil Sock choose this life? Was he a Federation citizen who actively sought out criminality, or someone who was either born outside of Federation citizenship or had no means of regaining it? We don't know the twists and turns of his life, whether he became part of the Space Mafia as a result of events or choices. We don't know if this was something he wanted, or if the Federation cared as little about him as it did about the colonies it abandoned in the Cardigan Demilitarized Zone. We do know that he robbed a bank, but we also know he sent his cut of all the money he gained to his family while he lived in an apartment with shipping containers. We do know that he agreed to an assassination, but we also know that he considered Ramus someone you don't say no to. We do know that he killed a man, but we also know that he didn't when he had the chance to do the same to O'Brien. Were all of those choices made with the same level of freedom, and what might that imply about how Syphil Sock came to be in the position he was in? And so the core question remains, did he choose this life? Or is this life something that happened to him while the Federation was too busy being a utopia for everybody else? With that all out of the way then, there is one more question. Is this a good episode of Star Trek? To be blunt, not really. It's 100 different Mafia stories held together with Star Trek-branded duct tape. God knows Trek's been a bit of a bugger when it comes to homaging the shit out of other people's ideas, but this one in particular felt out of place. It's perhaps best highlighted in the bank robbery scene, a string of techno-babble bollocks that feels like somebody threw darts at the Shadowrun rulebook. All we were missing was a cyberdeck and a mullet. Perhaps my harsh judgment of the episode is due to there being so much potential in the premise. We don't often get to see what life is like for people who are from Federation member species but don't live within the Federation. Our main look at that was abruptly cut off when those behind the scenes decided the Marquis was surplus to requirements and ended their plot line. There's plenty of room then to look at situations which aren't so extreme as colonies in the DMZ were, but still exist outside of the Federation. I'd have loved exploring how those two different cultures coexist and interact, getting some insight into how much freedom to do as they please Federation citizens truly have. It might have been a good chance to look at something Eddington suggested previously, that the Federation is offended by the idea of anybody choosing to not live within it. All of those things would have been great to explore. What we got instead was a pound shop Donnie Brasco in a trench coat and fake moustache. Switch out the Klingon disruptor rifle for a contemporary gun, and there's nothing in the main story that'd tell you this was an episode of Star Trek. For as much as I regularly say I enjoy episodes that go off the beaten path, there's a distinction between something different and something else entirely. End of episode.
Bugger me, no background. That must mean we're making progress.
Or the guy who makes these knew he couldn't get away with just flipping the old one again.
Probably, but I'm trying to stay positive.
There's Pringles in that city.
How do we reconcile knowing these backgrounds were made by the guy we're on our way to rob?
Doctor Who approach, mate. Just ignore it.
Isn't that insulting the viewers?
Yeah, but that's just a bonus.
What do you reckon we'll find in the centre of the Geo-City then?
I get the distinct feeling it will very much depend on stock photo libraries.
Not necessarily. He might pay to get some art made for it.
You do know these cartoon versions of us are 2 years old at this point, right?
Fair point well made, son.
Woof.